I'm not a molecular pathologist, I'm just a cytomorphologist, but I try my best to convey some messages that it can be very useful in collaboration with different departments of the institute, different pathology departments and also pathology department. Actually, when Professor invited me to give this talk, I was just coming from Italy, Milan. I was attending the European Cytopathology Conference, and before that it was in also Geneva, Switzerland. The important notice in such international meeting that considerable components of data presentation now related to molecular pathology, and even some sort of frustration. You don't find too much cytomorphology now. Maybe you find cytomorphology more in workshops, seminars, slide seminar, and this reflected the importance of molecular testing in the field of cytopathology. Okay, so actually, as one of the figures in cytopathology said, it has been said that molecular diagnostic is the future of diagnostic anatomic pathology, but now we believe that in many ways the future has achieved. To the extent that pure cytopathology conference now just dealing with molecular aspects, like in one coming in Rome and dealing with human coronavirus, and the other one NGS in the thyroid regions. My talk outline will include the know-how, just definitions in brief way in cytology and cytology material, how can serve for molecular testing, and the role of molecular the role of molecular testing in different aspects or diagnostic decision in different systems in cytopathology. You know that cytopathology as a diagnostic branch has emerged as one of the components of anatomical pathology in the recent year. Why cytology? Less expensive, fast, easy, reliable, psychologically accepted, and ancillary technique can be applied. Many surgeons now just based solely on the diagnostic decision in cytology, like in pancreas, lung, liver, thyroid, and also many biopsies also based on cytologic diagnoses. The story of cytology actually started many years ago, but the breakthrough has been achieved by Dr. Papanicolaou, who introduced the BAP test to predict or to screen cervical cancer carcinoma, and the achievements in BAP test did that it decreased cervical cancer by 70 to 80%. So it's the most common cost-effective cancer reduction program ever devised. The diagnostic cytology divisions, two main components, exophylative, as you know, and FNA cytology, or fine needle aspiration cytology. Generally, the role of cytology in the medical field: screening, prevention, diagnostic, prognostic, predictive, and monitoring, in collaboration nowadays with molecular testing. Multidisciplinary teamwork is mandatory in the field of cytopathology to make decisions, and however, cytopathology is different and difficult because prospective pathology, subjectivity, heterogeneity of the material you have, and what you see, it's not all what you believe that it's histologically. I mean, nobody can imagine for the first impression that fibroadenoma as a straightforward diagnosis in histopathology can give you one of the most common cause of false positive diagnoses in FNA because of weird pattern and cellularity and different cell components. This is why, because when we look at the histopathology, we look at two-dimensional configuration, reflecting the spatial configuration, but in cytology, just cells flying the space. In histopathology, we got good material, biopsy material, or the whole organ. We can appreciate components or tissue components related to each other, but in cytology, just look more emphasis on the nuclear features and cell morphology. Just we collect the data from here and there to make our diagnostic decision. It can be successful in certain circumstances if you have significant component of the lesion, and it can be very weird, very indeterminate, very inconclusive in certain circumstances that can be frustrating to the clinician and also to the patient because we cannot do more. So now molecular testing can serve as an aid to the final diagnostic decision, as we will see. The concern of material tissue is the issue for everybody. So if we would like to make successful diagnostic test, we should guarantee good material, either from cytology specimen or other type of specimen. Finally, the aspiration material can offer good material for molecular testing. And the disadvantage of conventional smear regarding the debris or RBCs or other components has been solved by the introduction of liquid-based cytology nowadays. That can decrease this blood, this mucus. It makes the material universal, uniform, and easy to look at and easy to stain. But in addition, it also guarantees good material for molecular testing by putting the material either scrap or in fine needle aspiration in cytolate solution or containers for many months to be used for molecular testing. And here you have a good example of how the material appears in liquid-based cytology, clear, nice, without debris, and this is a conventional one. Also, nowadays, evolving techniques of EUS or EPAS that can also retrieve material through endoscopic ultrasonography aided by FNA, that we can retrieve material from chest and abdomen. And also in the presence of teamwork of ROSE approach, that rapid on-site evaluation, pathologists or cytologists attending in the area of patient's lesional sampling, he can guarantee good feedback with the clinicians, immediate assessment of adequacy of material by fast staining. Also, high-quality smear and cell-block material can be guaranteed, and triage the material, whatever according to the preliminary impression, that the goals of the ROSE should answer what, do I have lesional cells in the same area? Is the material can be added for preliminary or even final diagnosis? Also, do I need to triage the material to different tests according to provisional impression? Cell block preparation in cytology also is indispensable nowadays and guarantee good material for molecular testing. As you see here, immunostain can be applied and DNA extraction can be also done using such material. Now I'm going to talk about different system and different molecular testing in each system in brief, how it's the impact of molecular testing. Number one, actually, the role of molecular testing in Pap smear. Human papillomavirus testing is now actually the biggest threat to Pap test, because simply 100% almost of cervical cancer caused by human papillomavirus. Also, anal cancer and different type of cancer in the vulvar and vaginal area, and even still the incidence of cervical cancer is high in the developing countries, though it decreased in the States and European countries, but still it's still a problem because they hope to eradicate this type of cancer. Human papillomavirus when infects the cervix, it has two stages, either a low-grade stage that majority of lesions can regress, but some lesions progress to high-grade or invasive cancer. In brief, the human papillomavirus, you know that it has two oncoproteins, E6 and E7, can interfere and deactivate the protein, retinoblastoma protein, that also lose the connection with E2F. This leads to overexpression of B16, and subsequently cell proliferation and progression to cancer stage. And human papillomavirus actually high-risk type are of concern, mainly 16 and 18 in causing cervical cancer. Now, the role of human papillomavirus testing in cervical cytology can be as a triage for low-grade lesions, test for cure, co-testing, or primary screening. The primary screening actually push BAP test in many countries nowadays for retirement because it's more sensitive, cost-saving, easier, more reliable, and less subjective. FDA approved one of these systems of testing the human papillomavirus, and it considered as possible type of screening tool. This is just one of the algorithms used by American Society of Colposcopy and Gynecologic Pathology to approach now cervical cancer screening using just only human papillomavirus testing. In the state, they still use co-testing, the pap smear, and human papillomavirus testing. As I said, many countries already implemented only pap screening test, and they overcome to some extent, or they are trying to minimize the disadvantage of low specificity of such testing by applying cytology triage, repeat testing, genotyping, or synthetic immunostaining, that dual stain of Ki67 and B16 that indicate high cervical lesion, high grade. Now the roadmap for papillomavirus screening still, because many countries with limited resource should continue PAP screening based on cytology. However, in the state, the co-testing, and many countries like Netherlands, Italy, Australia now they are implementing the PAP test as human papillomavirus screening test. And many people they found such approach can be crisis, but it can be crisis to opportunity. It can be crisis for cytotechnologists, labor marketing. But now the advice that cytotechnologists should learn molecular biology, and also the School of Cytotechnology should shift to what's called mid-level staff school of medicine, to change the syllabus and curriculum to make staff mid-level staff. They can interpret cytology, they can do molecular, they can do processing, they can do many things under the supervision of pathologists. Shifting into another area of molecular testing can be very useful is the thyroid area. Thyroid cancer, it's like an epidemic nowadays. It's rising in the States and worldwide. And FNA, it is a prime test to evaluate thyroid nodules. It's a test of choice. Given that 5% of the population complain of thyroid nodule, however, 5% only cancer, and the advantage of FNA in the professional, skillful hands decrease the surgery by 50%. And they are aiming now for more and further decrease of the surgery. Different reporting system all over the world now, but the most famous system of reporting thyroid FNA that we should implement in our practice, Bethesda system. The advantage of Bethesda system, it gives you risk of malignancy in each category and what is the line of management. But again, given that no diagnostic test can be ideal, we have a limitation, we have some area, gray zones as I mentioned before, that can be solved nowadays to some extent by molecular testing. Molecular analysis of this FNA sample may improve the accuracy of cytological diagnosis and consequently the patient management. Based on the molecular thyroid cancer developed and progress through accumulation of genetic alterations that can serve as an important diagnostic, prognostic, predictive biological marker. Here we have also the thyroid cancer genome atlas. Atlas is already defined, and a model of thyroid carcinogenesis is also already defined with an introduction of an new entity, they call it NIFT, non-invasive follicular tumor with papillary pattern that can be problem for cytologists and histopathologists in certain circumstances to classify certain lesion to follicular bivalent tuberous carcinoma or just a hyperplastic nodule. Researchers actually agreed that several demonstrations or approved that demonstrated the feasibility of molecular testing in routine thyroid FNA using air-dried smear or cell block smear or liquid-based material. We can apply mutational markers, gene expression, microRNAs, or proteomics in these issues. One of the studies on 47 thyroid FNA using a panel of possible genetic alteration and mutation and gene rearrangement, they conclude that any mutations can be strong indicator of malignancy, and BRAF is the most common mutation, 100% positive predictive value. Actually, two approaches now in the case of indeterminate nodule by FNA to have what's called two main gene classifier applications, one for diagnosis and one for prognostic. For diagnostic issues, we have two schools or two approaches. The rule in disease approach that analyze several genes, mutations with high positive predictive value. These ultimately lead to decrease the radical operation. Also, another approach exclude malignancy with high negative predictive value to avoid surgery in about 43%. With the introduction of NGS, now great evolution and success approaches in prediction of such mutations in a more fast and accurate way. And I believe that Dr. Moret talked about the concept of NGS and the era, and this is nowadays very useful in the field of thyroid FNA, complemented with such technique to be more sensitivity, to giving more sensitivity, multiple gene analysis, cover all genome alterations, can be cost-effective, high throughput, high scalability, and multiplexing. One of these work actually achieved specificity with 92% and sensitivity by 90%, and this including several genes, mutation detection, and rearrangement. University of Pittsburgh Hospital Center, actually now the molecular testing is an integral part inside the pathology report for indeterminate nodules. However, molecular testing should be just an accompaniment, not to replace cytology and other investigations. It's a teamwork, multidisciplinary approach, and combining a lab. Moving into the area of lung cancer, as you know, we too much emphasis and concern regarding our role, pathologists and cytologists in this area, given that the fact that most specimen now it's just small or cytology material, minimal material, no more many resections, but the different technique, the ROSE technique can guarantee good material, securing good material for molecular testing and immunostaining. With the new classification of lung adenocarcinoma, now the pathological cytologists should give too much emphasis to define the type of the adeno or squamous carcinoma, and to guarantee to have good material that proved in many works that it can be very accurate in 93% or 94% overall accuracy if you compare it with the tissue. Different type of material can be given to molecular testing, direct smear, cell block, or liquid-based cytology. And nowadays, no more non-small or small. We should further classify tumors into squamous or adeno based on the immunostaining, and to retrieve material for different type of molecular testing. And the algorithm for that, biopsy, small biopsy or cytology, should define the type of tumor, and then moving into the molecular testing, either to epidermal growth factor, KRAS, BRAF, and HER2, and new or mutational insult can happen also in lung carcinoma, and then go through the rest of the panel according to the results. Some biologists or oncologists initially test for KRAS. If they are present, no need to further to do any mutations, given that KRAS is downstream of EGFR or EML4ALK. So KRAS mutation overpowers other mutations, as some believe. As I said, different types of material can be used. Smear, liquid-based, or cell-block material with considerable degree of accuracy and sensitivity, and also the laser capture or dissection of some of these material on the smear can guarantee that you got good cells, even if they are not many, 50 cells, to evaluate for EGFR or other molecular techniques. Cell-block techniques also very useful. You see here pleural effusion with adenocarcinoma, and it showed abnormality in EGFR using this effusion, and also cell block preparation also proved to be very useful in EGFR gene mutation study in cytology specimen. And coming as the next generation sequencing, further enhanced detection of such abnormality in smaller and smaller material. As you see here, less than 40% of cases showed very minimal material that cannot be solved by Sanger but solved by NGS technique. As you see here, Sanger gave wild mutation, or wild changes, and NGS gave 2 EGFR mutation on one of these smears with necrotic material but some viable cells. The same also in the cell block. You might have some viable cells can be detected and analyzed molecularly using NGS rather than sample sequencing. We should think outside the box to appreciate also that we have new mutations like BRAF and HER2, and hoping that can be good in targeted therapy in the future. The role of fluorescence in cytoprioritization also accentuated in cytology material, and you see here carcinoma cells. We can apply fish on the BAB smear stain, even stained smear. We can destain the smear and to apply fish to be diagnostic in with applying 4 probes, and this is normal cells giving negative signals with the translocation or rearrangement or inversion of ALK and deletion. Also, we can appreciate break apart abnormality and single deletion abnormality. As you see in here, 3 cases of adenocarcinoma demonstrating abnormal. This is yes, increase in the number, but no any abnormality. This is a break apart, can be indicating epidermal growth factor, and these single orange-red signals indicating abnormalities are results. Another study also proved the role of ALK in smear cytology that can be maybe more advantageous over the cell block or tissue section, given that the whole nuclei evaluation happened and avoiding the nuclear truncation that can happen in tissue section. Molecular testing in breast cytopathology also documented in many evidence-based data, and they recommend also that we can apply ERBR, even HER2, in metastatic lesions or in advanced tumors, and on cytology material with very reliable, reproducible results, always under external quality control. And you will be surprised that if you see these long bars in Karolinska Institute of Medicine, one of the famous institute in cytology, Sweden, these long bars are FNA case in breast cancer, and these short bars are the core needle biopsy. They base their experience on the fine needle aspiration, applying ERBR, hormonal studies, and not only in Sweden but also in Gustavo C. Institute in Trieste in Italy. Also, they apply also FNA extensively in breast lesion as a prime investigation. And not to underestimate core needle biopsy value, but still core needle biopsy is not very ideal as many people expect or think. So we believe that we can be both FNA and core needle biopsy can be complementary in evaluation of breast lesions. Here in our area, we receive many cases as advanced breast cancer. So fine needle, very ideal in such cases to even to give even new adjuvant chemotherapy or whatever the therapy based upon fine needle cell block preparation and or smear staining. You can aspirate from such satellites, and you don't care about invasive or invasive. Sure, it's invasive, and you can apply for a biological marker that it is valid, reliable, evidence-based data about ERBR, HER2 immunostaining, as you see here, can be comparable to cytology to histopathology, and also different type of in situ hybridization can be applied on the cells of breast FNA. Nowadays, what's called inflammatory ductal carcinoma, evolving issue, and the FNA can be very ideal when you don't feel any mass, but just redness, edema, and random sampling of breast. Always in my experience, successful in such cases with no evidence of mass to aspirate tumor cells from the lymphatics that can serve as good material for everything immuno and molecular testing. Also, given the tumor heterogeneity, subclones, and the different genetic profile changes nowadays, also FNA can serve as a good material for such conditions. We have just one problem in pancreatic cystic lesions that we would like to know, is it mucinous or non-mucinous? Because mucinous cysts may potentially malignant, so we know that we have some sort of triage, carcinoembryonic antigen measuring the fluid, but however, some mucinous cysts do not express high carcinoembryonic antigen. Now, the role of, again, NGS can be very significant nowadays to support the diagnosis of mucinous cyst when the carcinoembryonic antigen is low or absent. Also to predict mucinous cyst or mucinous tumor when the sonar is inconclusive or ambiguous. Mesothelioma, big issue to differentiate between reactive and mesothelioma, and now fish can play a role to detect abnormal signals in fish in case of mesothelioma. Urine cytology, again, as any diagnostic test, have a gray zone that include atypical cells, or what's called ASCAS, or atypical cells of undetermined significance. And now many ancillary techniques, one of the most famous and thinnest and specific is fish, that can use equivocal multi-probe fish in equivocal urinary cytology with tibia, or upper urinary cytology that can be very worrisome, and monitoring of intravesical BCG, and given the fact about the abnormality in chromosome number 3, 7, 17, and 9p21, also give you abnormal signals, but a word of caution. And here we have a case of suspicious for DCI carcinoma in situ, proved to be abnormal in fish, abnormal signals, can be diagnostic. Here we have a nightmare of pelvic wall cytology that may show worrisome features, but still benign. Here fish can help to solve the problem, but be aware about the false positive diagnoses that can be present as any diagnostic test, as in Umbrella cells may show a crazy chromosome that can be explained by endoreduplication under cellular stress, so be aware of false positive diagnoses. And soft tissue also, nobody can imagine that fine needle aspiration can be good approach in evaluation of soft tissue lesions. Nowadays, with cytomorphology, immunohistochemistry, cytogenetics, or molecular testing, along with proper clinical radiology, can give you up to 90% accuracy in such cases. Lymph node also, it's a matter of debate. Many years ago, they claimed that no meat in lymph node, no treat. But nowadays, before 1985, FNA for lymph node stopped. But now, due to new technology, new classification of lymphoma, young pathology or receptive clinician pathologists, with the fixing good lab with ancillary technique, flow cytometry, molecular testing, can help in diagnosis of many cases in lymphoma. Actually, before, yes, we have some limitation, but many centers now use such complementary multidisciplinary approach to diagnose over 90% of lymphoproliferative disorder in the lymph node using FNA. So now, FNA in lymph node, yes and no. Yes, as I said, with complementary use of ancillary technique. No, because we have limited also for cases that cannot be resolved except with tissue biopsy. In conclusion, molecular pathology has been widely integrated into the conventional cytology as diagnostic, prognostic, predict cytometry and screening adjunct tool. Cytology material sample will be suited for molecular testing, especially for low DNA input or in hypocellular material. Tumor heterogeneity, tumor dynamic over time and space, changing tumor genetic profile, and available drug resistant, random repeated cytology. Very practical, ethical, and easy to for molecular testing. And taking multiple samples in metastatic disease is reliable compared to liquid biopsy that currently may show some sort of low sensitivity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, for your interesting talk. Any questions? Now, may I call Dr. Samuel Murray for next talk, liquid biopsy, potentials and pitfalls.
So, Ahmed, I'm not going to cross you over. I'm talking about other biopsies. Okay? Not cytology. Okay? Something similar, but not cytology. Chairman, thank you very much. May I have you?
Yes.
For those who are still here, well done. Okay, liquid biopsies and use in oncology. So, I'm going to talk about CTCs. 2 or 3 slides on exosomes, because I'm not really interested in exosomes, and then cell-free DNA. Okay. So, why are we thinking of doing molecular versus anatomical? Well, anatomical is going, as you just heard from Ahmed, they're losing their jobs. You're losing your jobs, and you're generating your positions into what I do. That's great. Okay. Soon we won't be talking so much about the location of a tumor. Breast cancer is in the breast, but it exists in men as well. Yes? So we have to think about what the causative agents are and how we can treat diseases more so than the anatomical location in many cases. And this is just something that's happening. Don't worry, you're not going to lose your jobs yet. Of course, there are a multitude of different molecular events that we can investigate, and we're only investigating 1 or 2 of them. We look at DNA and RNA. We look at protein with immunohistochemistry. We don't look at anything else yet. There's only one test for methylation available. There's a whole host of other things coming. So it will develop and it will continue to develop. And of course, the complexity of signatures is causing us a little bit of concern, because it makes it complex in terms of what will be the target, not so much about what we're seeing. We're trying to investigate too much, maybe. So, as I said before, we have to be point-specific and think about what we really want to investigate, and all of the other stuff around there, we really can't do much about it at the moment, because we don't have enough data to do anything anyway. But you will realize that virtually all tumours will have at least 3 somatic mutations, maybe more, because we're not looking at all genes. We're only looking at a subset of them. Okay. Molecular events, however, will be multiplex. So, and all cancers evolve. And some re-evolve after treating them, relapse. And when they re-evolve, they're no longer what you started with. And that's extremely interesting, especially in terms of what we just heard from Ahmed, because we should re-biopsy. The problem with re-biopsy, as you realize, is it's very costly, it's damaging, and in many cases, it's not practical to do it. Never mind the ethics behind re-biopsy. How many times will you do it until you get material that Ahmed can use or we can use? Do you re-biopsy the 3rd time in the patient? So it's a complex issue. And of course, as I mentioned before, we have heterogeneity, not just between tumours, but within the same tumours. And this is probably evident now for all tumour types. There's plenty of data coming out now that if you really do look, you will find multiple clones. That's fairly logical. And again, the same thing. You come back to when, which, and how often. And the how often is the complex one when we're talking about let's go back and rebiopsy at relapse, or if we don't have such a good diagnosis. So we have to find alternatives. And liquid biopsies may well assist. May not be the final solution, but they assist. So there are many investigations along this road. I'll forget this one, and I'll forget that one, and I'll forget this one, and I'll forget this one. So why liquid biopsies? Well, fairly simple. You can repeat them, and in fact, they're really not really invasive. Taking a blood sample is not the same as taking an FNA or an FFB. Okay? It's something that's routine, people do it. So it's not really taken as being interventional, even though it is. Or you can use urine, or you can use saliva. You can use hair follicles. You can use another solution as another biopsy. Of course, you have to also think of the cost benefit, and I put some numbers from the States there. The average cost of a blood sampling is $6. The average cost of a biopsy is $14,000. $14,000. That's more than I earn a year. Come on. So, tissues versus liquid. The benefits are obvious. And of course, when you're talking about a biopsy, you're talking about something which is static and it's for today. It doesn't represent the patient tomorrow, nor the tumour. And if you think of blood-borne diseases, or even melanoma, which is something in between the two, what happens today is very different from what happens tomorrow. They progress very rapidly. So having access to something that you can monitor time-wise in terms of treatment and outcome would be very useful. So we're thinking that we can use liquid biopsies, and if we can have something which is what we call a surrogate marker to follow, or a real marker to follow, it makes sense that we should be investigating it. And of course that becomes very evident when you look at that type of diagram, that if I can see something from a liquid biopsy before I can see it on CT, which we start to get data for now in melanoma and in lung cancer and in colorectal cancer, although it's not evident yet because it's not released in reality, we start to see that we can utilize liquid biopsies to predict quite nicely what will happen to the patient in terms of their main tumour bulk. And that makes a lot of sense, because what's happening within the body of the individual is you're having the tumour growing, expanding, changing, and excreting certain markers that we can detect. So if you can follow in colorectal cancer a RAS mutation in plasma, what are you measuring? You're measuring the continued presence of the tumour, and you may actually well be measuring the burden of the tumour, meaning how big it is, how dangerous it's going to become, how metastatic it is. And this is the type of data we need to get over the next few years. But it's on track. However, and this is the big but, and it's a big but, they're only 70% concordant, no matter what you take. From whomever. Measuring whatever you want. The concordance is at best 70%. And this causes some issues in terms of the false negatives, as we call them. What do we do? Do we rebiopsy? Do we take another sample? Well, it might just be the case that those individuals don't have a tumour burden or don't have release of that marker to be able to detect. So in those cases, you can no longer use a liquid biopsy. It's not a lost patient, it's just a patient that you can no longer follow using that strategy. But you have to do something else. Sure, that's okay. Okay. So, circulating tumour cells, and what's in a liquid biopsy? There's a host of things in a liquid biopsy, and what I mean a liquid biopsy without red blood cells and without white blood cells. So remove everything else and just take the serum or the plasma. Okay? We would prefer plasma for lots of reasons. And there's a host of things in there that you can utilise. Origins of CTCs, I don't need to go through this. Can we use them? Well, there's probably only 6,000 or 7,000 in your entire body if you're a patient. They're so rare. So tell me, how much blood do I need to take to actually be sure that I'm going to identify them? Well, they say the cutoff is 7.5 mils. Okay. The first time it doesn't work, I need to go back. So you have to think about it like that in terms of what the practicalities are as well in terms of what you're asking. There's 6,000 or 7,000 cells within 6 or 7 litres of blood. It's nothing, absolutely nothing. And of course, there are multiple techniques to try and identify them, to find them, and which markers will we use, Ahmed, to identify CTCs? But I don't agree with you. I don't like CD146, okay? I would prefer something else. CK19? CK19, maybe? Exactly. So there's no ground level for everyone to play with. Everyone's talking different things at the moment still. There's really no homogeneity about what we're talking about in terms of CTCs. That makes life difficult. Are they clinically important? And this is the bigger question. Well, I wrote the slide after doing a few talks to a few groups that I work with CTCs, and I'm biased. I don't like CTCs. Okay, so that's flat because it's too heterogeneous for me. There are too many systems. They're very expensive, and the results that come out are always very, for me, a little bit spurious. Is it really, really there, or isn't it really, really there? Okay. So I sit back and I go, okay, yes, it's prognostic for metastatic breast cancer based on a few studies. Thankfully, there are 5 prospective studies in breast cancer to look at this in a nice way. Similar backbone, similar structure, they should give similar data at the end, if it really works. And then I went back again and I said, well, let me just look at a couple of the papers specifically. And I pulled this one out, nice, but there's no consistency between treatment arms. It's not randomized. ER, PR, HER2, not assessed. Crap. So I go to a meta-analysis. This should be our best evidence. And I just do this. And I say, poor quality of studies, yes. Many treated patients, no prognostic significance there. They've been treated, so you can't tell. Okay? High heterogeneity within the studies, different techniques used. So there's no comparison. And none of it's been validated. So I go back to my original conclusion. Sorry, I don't like CTCs. Exosomes. Really, you're stuck with messenger RNA, microRNA, and protein. You're going to have no DNA and no real RNA in there, in reality. You can't do much with them because not every patient has them. And because they have a biological function in the body, they actually do something physically within the body. There are many of them. So the idea of identifying those which you could identify mutations which would correlate with your disease are more limited. And what I mean by there are a lot of them, there are an awful lot of them. There are more exosomes than there are red blood cells. Okay? So no matter what sample you take, you're going to have millions of exosomes. Are they the ones you want? How do you identify them? I have no idea. I'm sorry. So I'll skip that. Analysis, etc. But thankfully, no one's trying to get clinical application, so I don't need to deal with this. Circulating, free, or tumour DNA. And of course, you can understand the process. We all have circulating, free DNA. It's logical. Theoretically, those who have malignancies may also have circulating DNA from their tumours. That's also logical. Can we use it? Well, we would hope to. And I highlight monitoring, because I really believe monitoring is the best way to go with this. Because as I said before, if you have a patient who has a high level of circulating tumour DNA with a biomarker that's related to the tumour and you can monitor it, it may give you clinically relevant data. If you just want to use it as a diagnostic and not use cytology or a whole tumour resection, it's not right, because you've got 30% fail rate. 30% of them don't have circulating tumour DNA that's applicable for molecular analysis. So you've got 30% of it you can't do anything with. So go back to your standard routine. However, for those that don't have biopsy, you cannot get biopsy. It may be expensive, difficult, time-consuming, etc. Or the patient just says, no. Take a blood sample, and you might get a bit further. So there are other ways. And of course, that's from blood. We can use plasma. We can use urine or saliva. Equally as well, in many cases. And of course, is it clinically relevant? Well, yes. Because you can find it in most cases, in most cancer types. Not in all patients. Different per tumour type. It's fairly logical as well. They're not all the same. Can you identify rearrangements? Yes, in all of them. So if you've got circulating tumour DNA or RNA from a patient with a tumour, you will find representative aberrations in those samples. If you take it from Ahmed and myself, we have none. If you take it from everyone else in the room, you have none. And there's plenty of data to show that a normal individual who does not have a malignancy has no baseline rearrangements in their plasma. Okay, so it's fairly clear-cut. Can you monitor actionable mutations? Yes, you can detect them. You can detect anything, because we can use a variety of techniques. It's not limited. Can you monitor progression? Of course you can monitor progression, and the studies are coming. And there are applications to the FDA for indications based on these. So they'll be coming in 2017, I hope. Can you look at residual disease after surgery? Why not? It's logical. Does that reflect tumour burden? This is a question that we have to think about and go for, because we have to be able to give limits of detection, relate that back to different techniques, and give a limit of detection which is representative for certain tumour types and certain biomarkers within indications. So now it becomes more and more complex. So you've got plenty of work ahead of you, Ahmed. Don't worry. Resistance or sensitivity? Yes, because if you can detect resistant mutations or sensitive mutations or biomarkers, whatever they may be, of course you can do so. Liquid biopsies in oncology today. I just pulled out a slide from a colleague. Of course, for BRAF, they exist. Forget the drugs, I'm sorry for putting names of pharmaceuticals. BRAF, KRAS, EGFR, HER2, ALK, ROS1. And there are more and more coming. You can do the same for PIK3CA, you can do the same for P53. It really doesn't matter. If it exists in the tumour, you're probably likely to find it in the plasma. So you can follow what's going on. But of course there's always problems. And the problems are related primarily to the amount of material that you have. What's currently available on the market? There are two tests, one by Covas and one by TheraScreen. Both applicable for EGFR mutations, to identify the mutations in those patients that you only have access to plasma. Not for monitoring, for diagnosis. They require 4 mils of plasma per layman. 4 mils of plasma is not clinically acceptable for me. It's too much. You're doing all of the normal workup on a patient and you ask for another 10 mils of blood, at least, maybe 12 mils of blood to get 4 mils of plasma, which is adequate for what you want. You're more likely to make a mistake if you take more plasma than if you take less, because you don't want to have any red blood cell contamination at all. Otherwise your experiment, forget it, it's not going to work. And now you're talking about limitations and limit of detection. What's in there to be found, and how sensitive should that technique be? Well, you have to remember, for EGFR mutations, all tests under CE-IVD marking, which are accessible and usable for patient diagnostics for EGFR in lung cancer, none of them has a sensitivity less than 1%. So now if I use another diagnostic, which is quite likely I will need to go below 1% to detect the EGFR mutation in plasma, is it clinically valid? Big question. And this goes to reimbursement. And this is an issue I'll discuss a little bit tomorrow. The same for colorectal cancer. Colorectal cancer, the limit of detection is 5%. Now I need to go below, I definitely need to go below 5% to identify mutations, RAS, in plasma. Is it clinically valid? So now we're going to have two different cutoffs. We're going to have one for tumour and one for plasma. Very confusing and very damaging, because we have no evidence to suggest that an allelic concentration or allelic burden of less than 2% in any tumour type for any biomarker is clinically validated, because it hasn't been done. Okay, so there are other questions we need to think about. Of course, the fail rates for even next-gen sequencing here are primarily because you don't recover very much DNA. Okay. So, which technique? They're about the same. You use droplet PCR or you use